Okay, so two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, right? When I hear this quote, the first thing that I think of is literal roads, right? I ride bikes quite a lot on a lot of well-traveled roads and a lot of less well-traveled roads. And so I really wanted to come through this with the perspective of what does the less traveled road look like, right? And in March of 2022, I went through and did a 100-mile bike ride through some of the least traveled roads in Middle Tennessee. There was a lot there. What does the least traveled road look like? Well, it's quite beautiful, right? But it's also incredibly challenging. It's bumpy. It's uncomfortable. It's, some places there is no road. It's just a creek that you have to cross by, right? It was really an incredible experience, but at the same time, it was incredibly challenging as well. Right. It was a very cold morning when I went there, and that water was not very warm. There were some kind of impromptu ice baths if you weren't very careful. Right. There were a lot of big hills that you had to get up, and big downhills that you had to navigate and get down as well. There were also flat tires. Right? I was prepared though, I was ready to go. I brought two spare tubes with me, and I was going to replace my flats on the ride and keep going. 20 miles in, I got my first flat tire. That's all right, I changed it, got back going. Then I got another flat tire. Okay, all right, still okay. Hopefully, I just got to be careful the rest of the time. I'll be okay. All right. Then the third flat tire came. Oh, that's okay, that's okay. There's someone with me who's going to help me out. He gave me his tube. I fixed it again, got back going again. 80 miles in, I'm going down a hill. I hit a rock pretty hard. Yeah, that's the fourth flat tire. I'm looking around. Yeah, there is no one around me. Oh dear. All right. Well, I ended up walking for a little bit. My heart has kind of sunk. Looking like a sad boy. Eventually someone comes by and has a tube for me. I replace it, I get going again. But my heart really wasn't in it at that point. And then two roads diverged in the woods. One well-traveled, smooth, county-maintained road. It was 10 miles and would get me back home. The other was the original route. It was 20 miles of more of the hard backcountry roads. And I took the more traveled road. I took the 10-mile easy way home. It was lovely. Right? So ultimately, though, I was a failure. I only did 90 miles. Only 90 miles. Right? But in that failure, I learned quite a lot. Right? I learned kind of how difficult some things could be, but also how capable I was of things. Even though my heart wasn't in it at the end, my legs were still feeling pretty good. I was like, oh, I got the physical ability to do this. And since then, I've done other big rides too, and I haven't been worried about it, because I was like, oh, I've done this before, I can do it again. Right? I've also learned I should get some bigger, sturdier tires. That might be useful, right? All right. So I've actually been riding bikes for I've actually been riding bikes for a very long time. I started when I was 14 years old, and I raced bikes competitively throughout college. I did it for 14 years. I even did some, could put some air quotes on this, but professional bike races as well. Maybe won $200 one time, but wasn't making much money from it. But I did compete at a pretty high level. And when I first got started racing, there was one thing that I found very challenging. As you can see, like when you have a bike race, there's always going to be the very big pack that you're riding in, right? There's a reason for this. Where's my physics students at, right? Air resistance, right? If you're sitting in the middle of the pack, people can block the wind for you. You have a much easier job, right? Someone who's on the front has to work a lot harder. They're going fighting against the wind the entire time, right? But the other kind of
issue with this, though, is you have to be able to, like, be okay, like, rubbing shoulders with people, bumping elbows, right? And it's very tight corners, and everyone wants to be at the front of that group, right? If you're going to win the race, you got to be at the front, right? Of course, not everyone can be at the front. Only that's kind of how the front works. You got to only have so many people that can be there, right? And I had a lot of difficulty with it. I was constantly just at the back of a race, regardless of how strong I was. I couldn't get up there, right? And my coach pulled me aside once and said, hey, look, I know, like, you're a shy, reserved, quiet, timid guy, but in the bike race, you can't be that, right? You have to be assertive. You have to say, nah, this is my spot. This is where I'm going, right? And I had to be uncomfortable. I had to go out of what I would usually be. I had to be a personality that I usually wasn't, right? And I actually got very good at that. It took some time, but by the end of my career, when I was doing other things like having a real job and going to grad school, I didn't have as much time to train, I wasn't as strong, but I was still able to get some results because I said, hey, this is my spot up here. I'm gonna take this, right? All right. Yes. So I ended up actually using my coach's advice when I got out of college and started my career, right? As was mentioned, I had an engineering degree, and when I got out of college, I took an engineering position at an HVAC firm, stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's a pretty common job for people who have engineering degrees, but certainly not the most glamorous at the same time. Every day, I would go into the office, be in my cubicle, get on my computer, stare at a bunch of numbers for several hours, and then kind of go home, right? It wasn't really a place where I could be particularly innovative, right? Wasn't all that challenging for me. I kind of figured the job out and had the same task pretty much every day. And so once I knew what I was doing, I did it, went home. It was all good. It was a very comfortable job for me. As I said, I was pretty good at it. And also, like, again, I was that shy, quiet person. It was very easy to be a shy, quiet person in an office environment where you just sit and stare at a computer all day, right? After being there for about a year, I kind of hit a crossroads when it came to what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. Oh, no. There we go. All right, so I kind of came across this crossroads again, right? I had a nice, smooth, easy, comfortable role that I could do. I had a promotion at that in that office, in that company, to a project manager. Again, something I knew I'd probably be pretty good at. I knew all the people there, so I knew I could do all right in the environment, right? There would be some learning, but I was also already doing a lot of the role of the project manager anyway, so it would have been similar for me, right? Or I could go and take on a new and different challenge, something that required me to be uncomfortable and do something that I wasn't necessarily good at. And I decided to do the latter in this situation. And I decided to become a teacher instead. All right? Now, being a teacher requires you to be sociable. It requires you to form relationships. It requires you to communicate, things that engineers famously aren't very good at usually. And it was something that I necessarily didn't feel good at as either. But I was like, I think I can do this. Let me try it. And I might fail. But in that possibility of failure was kind of the excitement of it, right? Yes. Yeah. All right. And so I did. And when I first jumped into teaching, again, there were some challenges. I wasn't instantly good at it. There were a lot of issues. My very first job that I had, where I was my own teacher in my own classroom, I had one class period where there were 36 kids all in the room at one time. Out of those 36, approximately 34 of them did not have any care about what I was telling them at the time. I was sitting there trying to get their attention, just like, excuse me, class, wasn't really working, wasn't working at all. And I ended that first day not feeling good about myself, right? But I kept at it. There were some people at that school who quit after 3 weeks. I stayed at that school for 3 years and really grew, right? This wasn't an environment that I thought that I would be good at. But I forced myself to keep going every day and try something new and make some improvements, and I did. And after 3 years, I can say, I think I succeeded fairly well, right? There's still more growth to have, but I did well. All right, so let's turn this a little bit into education, right? You guys are all students, and in students, you guys face choices every single day. You guys have this similar path of you can pick the comfortable or you can pick the uncomfortable, right? And it's very tempting to pick the comfortable, right? You might be telling yourself like, oh man, I can't do this, like, whatever, right? And just don't even really attempt it. Maybe you're going like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Let me just Google it. Let me just ask the smart kid. Okay, I get it now. All right, sure, right? But when you do that, and you're not really challenging yourself, yeah, you might learn a little bit, but you're probably not really going to learn that much. You need to get into the uncomfortable, right? So are you going to fail when you do that? Maybe, you know. Are you going to run into some roadblock? Maybe. But if you try it at first, you actually kind of have a chance of learning something, right? And that doesn't mean never get help at all. That doesn't mean at some point it is worth taking that comfortable path, right? I mean, for me on that bike ride, it was 80 miles of discomfort, and then, okay, all right, I'm ready to take the comfortable route, right? Try as far as you can until you reach that point of failure, and then you can say, okay, yeah, let me go another way, right? Yeah, so the last thing that I want to leave you guys with is this quote here: life is long, so don't wait. That's me. Okay, I said that. All right, that sounds kind of confusing, but okay, I'll explain it, all right? A lot of people say life is short. I don't really believe that, right? Throughout your life, you're going to have tons and tons of different options that you can take, right? Having said that, don't wait to take those more exciting, those more challenging, those more uncomfortable options. Right? You have your entire life to do the easy, to do the comfortable. And maybe you'll get 80 miles into your journey and you're ready to take that comfortable position, right? But those uncomfortable, those challenging, those interesting stuff, there's a window of opportunity for them. Those windows can close, right? When I took my job as a teacher, I was 24 years old when I decided that I wanted to be a teacher. And a lot of people were critical of that, and they said, well, why don't you be an engineer? Like, you get paid more, people respect you more, you don't have to deal with
kids. But yeah, those are all great reasons. I don't really know why I'm being a teacher now. But because I made that decision when I was 24, doesn't mean I can't be an engineer when I'm 34, or 44, or 54, right? You can always go back to that. You can always go back to that comfortable idea. Right now, my parents are in pretty good health. Relatively speaking, they're in pretty good health, right? Maybe at a certain point they won't be. And I might want to live a lot closer to home in that situation. But right now I have the opportunity to be here. And I'm very glad that I am. All right? So life is long, so don't wait. All right?
and they lived happily ever after. The end. All right. Thank you, guys.